Actually gone for Kaepernick, i.e. the Jags. Who knows what would have happened. I think we can go to Mike Carlson. Good morning to you, Mike. How are you?
Okay, how are you, Jerry?
Yeah, pretty good. Myself and Owen made the wise decision not to stay up for the Eagles-Vikings game. So we might start with that, because I guess that's what most people will be waking up this morning wondering what the hell happened. And it was a complete and total rout. The Eagles absolutely killed them.
Yeah, it really was. And it was the kind of game that you could hang around after halftime just to see what would happen early on, but when they scored in the third quarter, it was definitely over. The Eagles got off to a good start, which is crucial in these kind of games, because by getting the lead, they forced Minnesota to be a bit more one-dimensional, and they didn't really want Case Keenum to have to win the ball through the air, which was kind of a common theme for at least three of the teams, we thought, coming into the playoffs. Chris Long, who last year played for the Patriots and won the Super Bowl, and the year before played for the Rams with Nick Foles, he actually was the key guy in that first quarter. He hit Case Keenum as Keenum was releasing a pass he probably shouldn't have thrown in the first place, but he has that habit of throwing balls up for his receivers to make plays. And so the ball didn't get there. Patrick Robinson intercepted it, ran it back for a touchdown. And then when Barnett caused Keenum to fumble, Long recovered the fumble, and the Eagles then made what was probably the play of the game. On a third down and long, Nick Foles somehow escaped the rush and hit out Alshon Jeffrey with a very long pass, 53-yard touchdown. And it was Foles looking like a veteran. He looked like the quarterback he was with the Eagles in the first Chip Kelly season, when he threw 26 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. It was all very controlled. He dealt with the rush really well. Keenum didn't deal with the rush so well. And the Eagles, it's kind of overlooked right now, but the Eagles also were able to run the ball very effectively early on against Minnesota's defense, which is tough against the run. And Minnesota wasn't able to do that. And of course, once they got down by 21-7, they couldn't do that. They couldn't afford to run the ball very much. They had to start throwing it. And that's when you make a team one-dimensional, they become easier to beat. I see Colin Kaepernick's back, and you were probably offering him a job with somebody.
Yeah, the Jags, maybe. We'll get to them in a minute. Just before I go any further, so last week we obviously saw this amazing emotional outpouring from the Vikings with the last-second fluky but also kind of genius miracle at the end of that game. Is it just impossible to come down off a high like that and then go and try and beat up a team as physical as the Eagles? In the regular season, you might be able to go back and coast through the next game, but this is knockout, a championship game where you've got to try and do exactly the same thing again.
Yeah, and that's one of the things people tend to overlook. You know, this is playoff football, which means that every team you're playing against is a good team, and when you get to this stage, they should be very good teams. And in fact, Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Jacksonville were 3 of the top 4 defensive teams in the league, so there aren't any easy outs there. But I saw a stat somewhere that teams that had won playoff games on last-second walk-off touchdowns were 0-5 in the next game. And when you think of the difference in the ending of the 2 games, the Eagles won by stopping Atlanta in the last minute of the game on four plays inside the 10-yard line. And you could argue, I hate doing psychological stuff, especially when it applies to the whole team, but you can argue that, yeah, it's a hard thing to come back from. And for the Eagles, it's a great thing to come back from, because you won it at home, with those big plays, not fluke plays, not one big play, but 4 really good defensive plays. And they were probably on a high. I think I was surprised that they weren't at least even or closer to even, given that they were at home. And given how similar the 2 teams are, Minnesota had some advantages over them, but the Eagles had some over Minnesota. And it was an interesting week, too, because the over-unders in both games were really attractive. And in this one, it was 38.5 points over-under. And people were all jumping on the under, saying it's going to be a defensive battle. But I took the Eagles, which was nice because they were actually got good odds to win outright. And the over, and the Eagles missed the over on their own. All Minnesota had to do was score half a point. and they were over it. And I thought if it were an offensive game, it would favor the Eagles. And I just thought, based on what they had done against Atlanta, even though it was only 15 points, they had found a way to make Nick Foles look more comfortable in the pocket and look like a starter. And he did an excellent job in this game, and it was largely schemed for him, but he had to make a few plays like that one to Jeffrey, and he did. Yeah,
because let's just talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think traditionally the difference between pressure on a quarterback changes the quarterback rating from like on a good scale. It's like you can beat Tom Brady with no pressure, but if pressure comes, you're generally Brian Hoyer. And Nick Foles' rating under pressure from last night's game is off the charts. So how did he suddenly become a quarterback who can perform at the highest level in the most pressurized game of his life?
Chris Long speaking in his ear, telling him he could do it, and to forget everything that Jeff Fisher did to him in St. Louis was probably a part of it. But all he had to do, and people think, because he's tall and skinny, that he's immobile, but he's not immobile. And we saw that the week before, because what they were running was a lot of Chip Kelly style option plays where he had to move along the line and then watch what the linebacker did. And he basically kept his composure enough to make the kind of small moves that really good quarterbacks make. You can do the spectacular ones, the guys like Russell Wilson who can spin around, and then turn around and still see the field. But the key thing for Foles was he kept his eyes downfield. And it's so important for a quarterback under pressure. You can watch Tom Brady, and the moment Brady's head drops because someone's coming in, then he's going to just go down. There's almost nothing else that will happen. But as long as you're keeping your eyes downfield, you can see what's there to throw. And then that Alshon Jeffrey pass, he basically took one step and threw it with guys all around him. But that one step gave him just enough room to get that ball downfield. And he does have a good, strong arm. He got that ball down there quickly and right on target.
Talk to us a little bit about that then as well, if you talk about how Eagles might be able to force that pressure onto Tom Brady and the Patriots, because that D-line by the Eagles this season has been outstanding, and it just seems weird that we're in this position that we might even consider that a franchise with the greatest quarterback head coach combination we potentially have ever seen could be brought down by a team led by a backup quarterback. But look, here we are, and like on Sunday week, talk to us about the likes of Fletcher Cox and that the rest of that defensive line, and how they may be able to put pressure on Tom Brady, which could lead to an upset here in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the other game, I'm sure. But, you saw what the Jags did to the Patriots for a half. And the Jags are a similar kind of fast defensive team. Philadelphia's defense revolves around Cox because he's sort of the anchor in the middle. And he's the kind of guy who can both absorb a couple of blockers, which gives more room for the pass rushers on the edges, but can also shoot a gap himself and rush himself. And they've got some good complementary guys with him, especially Tim Jernigan, who they picked up from Baltimore in the offseason. And Jernigan was an end on a three-man line in Baltimore, but now he's a tackle in a four-man line in Philadelphia, and it suits him much better. He's similar to Cox, but not as good. He can perform both roles, fill space, or come in and rush. And then they've got very good guys off the edge. And Jim Schwartz, a very aggressive defensive coordinator, whose specialty really is taking his two ends and moving them as wide outside as he can to make sure that they get isolated blocks, usually with a tackle, but sometimes a tight end, which is very dangerous for the defense. So they're almost always operating one-on-one, while those other two guys, Cox and Jernigan and whoever else rotates through, are occupying the inner three linemen. And the formula works well because they can generate rush off four people, as Jacksonville could for a while against Brady. And when you do that, that means you're dropping 7 into coverage against 5 receivers, and it gives you options, to either double team people or to keep safeties back as to prevent big plays killing you. And most of the really good defensive teams are like that. It's hard these days to be a good defensive team if you're constantly having to blitz a 5th or a 6th rusher.
You mentioned Jim Schwartz, obviously part of the Bill Belichick coaching tree. He was part of that legendary staff that Belichick had at the Cleveland Browns before Cleveland ends up becoming the Baltimore Ravens. Look, I don't know if this is one of those many subplots that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks, but certainly protecting Brady is going to be the main thing that people talk about when they're analysing the Eagles' chances. And there was just a moment in the first half where it looked like Brady got spooked. He kind of looked behind him and there was no one there, and it looked like he was about to go down before eventually he makes a yard before taking the sack. And I hadn't seen that before, certainly not this season, and you just thought, ooh, this doesn't really look good for the Patriots here. This really looks like it could be a massive upset.
Yeah, I mean, the key part of that game to me was the Patriots in the last 2 minutes of the first half getting a touchdown, which made it a close game again, which kept it tight. And then they adjusted at halftime and played better defense. They had their third string right tackle was in protecting Brady, and I really thought that Jacksonville would be able to take more advantage of that. But the sacks they got were actually Beasley coming from the other side, which might be because the Patriots were paying more attention to the right side. And Jacksonville, it was an interesting thing looking ahead to that game, whether the Patriots would try to play in a run formation, either with two tight ends or with a fullback and a back and just two wide receivers to keep Jacksonville in their base defense, or whether they would spread the field, let Jacksonville go into their prevent sub-package nickel defense, which means that the big guy usually comes out, Darius or whoever else is inside. Calais Campbell moves inside. Beasley and Ngakoue both play on the ends, and it gives them a faster pass rush. And New England tried one series in the second half where they played hurry up. They didn't huddle, and they tried to keep Darius on the field, tire him, but they got nowhere with it. They couldn't. They ran the ball 3 times and couldn't get a first down. And then when Gronk was out, obviously they only have one tight end, so they have the second one. The third one is a undrafted rookie guy who's really a receiving type tight end. So they basically had to spread the field, and then. This is the genius of Tom Brady, is the ability to stand in there, to know where he wants to go and to know what's going to be available. And there were a couple of plays. We were doing the game on the radio there, but we're not doing the call. We're taking the call from the States. So there were a couple of plays where they come out and they take one step off the line, and it's Danny Amendola's crossing. And you can see that Allen, the tight end, clearing for him, and he comes underneath, and they get that kind of thing. And Brady is the best in the business at knowing where his receivers are going to be, knowing what's going to be open, what they might be able to take advantage of. And if you noticed in the game, almost everything they threw was to someone who a linebacker was covering. And the only real exceptions was when they tried to take deep shots. And I halfway think, when you underthrow your receiver, I think deliberately on a deep pattern, you're trying to draw those pass interference penalties, knowing that Jacksonville play a very aggressive, hands-on kind of pass defense. But everything else was Brady would look back, where's the linebacker, who's got a linebacker on him, and then throw to that receiver.
Were they helped by the officials last night, Mike, in your opinion, the Patriots?
Not really. I can't see anything wrong with the personal foul for the head-to-head contact, because even if you lead with your shoulder, you're not supposed to hit the head anyway on a so-called defenseless receiver. I would have called more pass interference penalties, because in the old retired, the old college receiver kind of thing, I like the old rule. The rule says you can't touch the guy. And the way the rule's interpreted is, well, you can touch him as long as you're not gaining, quote-unquote, an advantage. Well, how can you not be gaining advantage if you're holding the receiver's hands down? Boyer was complaining about the officiating after the game, and there was a beautiful shot of a pass they threw to Cooks down the middle of the field, and he was double covered, Boyer behind him, and I think it was Ramsey, or it might have been Gibson coming up on the other side, and Boyer's got his left hand in and wrapped around, or his right hand wrapped around Cooks's left arm, literally hooked. but you can't see it except unless you're the camera in the end zone. The officials couldn't see it. Which is great pass defense, but you're getting away with one. And on the Gronk thing, he was actually tackled before he got hit. Gibson was on the ground; he had fallen down, and he grabbed him by the ankles and pulled him over. The one call I think that went against the Patriots, and they only had one penalty, and I think they were probably lucky to dodge a holding call or two, but then. So was Jacksonville. Was that fumble by Dion Lewis, which the more replays I saw of it, the less it looked like a fumble. It was the kind of play that if it was a pass, it would have been ruled an incomplete pass. But he was running with the ball, so failure to complete the run when he hit the ground isn't really cause for a fumble.
No, his knee was on the ground. It looked like that was clear.
Yeah, it looked pretty clear.
The error was compounded when they actually blew up, when it looked like Miles Jack was going to take it in for a touchdown. Just on the first half, what we saw in terms of the play calling from Jacksonville was absolutely sensational. Their fourth string running back suddenly looked like an absolute genius. TJ Yeldon looked like he was free in space. They were using Fournette in different ways, and they were very aggressive. In the second half, it was pile Fournette into the line of scrimmage and hope that somehow he manages to find a hole. Is that a psychological thing, or is that the halftime adjustments being made by the Patriots that shut down all that space?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. They come out with the lead and they become a little more conservative. But Fournette was gaining constantly up the middle in the first half. They were getting him at the line of scrimmage. He was still getting 4 yards. And the idea with Fournette is eventually he's going to break one big game. When they can't stop him. But in the first half, every time they went to the corners, whether it was Yeldon or Grant out of the backfield or a tight end out there, nobody was covering for the Patriots. They were absolutely horrible. They were so intent on trying to clog the middle, and with safeties in, they were constantly getting fooled by the motions and not getting outside. And it was easy for Jacksonville. And watching what they did at halftime and came out, the Patriots were still ganging to stop the run. Malcolm Brown played a whole lot more, I think, in the second half than in the first. But they brought Lee in on the edge, and they made sure that their linebackers were getting to the outside. So if Chung was going to get caught inside, which he did a couple of times on big plays by Jacksonville, a linebacker was going to be outside so that they weren't going to be able to turn that corner. And that, I think, was the biggest adjustment they made. And in the second half, you just saw, as the pressure came up, you just saw Blake Bortles make a couple of bad throws. Open receivers that he just couldn't hit. He overthrew slightly. It's a fine line, and Brady misses throws. Brady comes back and makes one when he has to. That's kind of the big difference. And even the last play, that ball goes a bit higher, and it might be a completion to D.D. Westbrook and not Knox. I mean, Gilmore wasn't beaten as clear, as thoroughly as they might have said, because he was running along, but he was behind Westbrook. So if you lead him with a high ball, Gilmore doesn't get that. But those are the kind of inches things that decide those games.
You've mentioned already that 2.5 minute period before halftime last night, which I thought was possibly the most vital stage of the game. And you mentioned the Patriots touchdown. There were still 55 seconds left in the half when the Jags have the ball in hand and they just kneel the half out. And you're starting to think to yourself, well, Nathaniel Hackett's come up with these really good plays to get Blake Bortles up the field, simple throws or just running the ball. And surely if you're going to beat the Patriots, you get one shot at it. You've got to trust a quarterback in that situation. And 55 seconds is enough time to get up the pitch, albeit how difficult it is, especially when Blake Bortles is your quarterback. But still, you've got to be trusting your quarterback in that situation, no?
Oh, Nick Foles did it in the exact same situation with less time, actually, at the end of the first half in their game, and they got a field goal out of it. Which was crucial. Yeah, I was saying the same thing off air, but screaming. How can you do this? The game's not put away. It's as if, and I don't think it was Nathaniel Hackett. I'm sure that came from Doug Marrone. We don't want to take a risk. We don't want to hand them the ball. But you put yourself into a lead. You've got a chance to add to it, and by sitting on it, you're almost saying we don't want to risk playing against your defense in a tight situation, and I think on both levels that doesn't work. They were moving the ball well. They didn't need that much yardage to get into field goal range. They didn't have to do anything crazy. I agree with you completely. It was a stunning moment, and it probably cost them one way or the other. It might not have cost them the game, but it certainly cost them in terms of how the balance of the game went. Now, in the back of their mind is obviously we're going to get the ball to start the second half, but what you're saying applies even more in that case. Put 3 on the board now, and we come back in the second half, and even if we only get 3 on the first drive, it's as if we've added a touchdown to the score.
It's the Patriots minus 5.5. That's the line that I'm seeing at the moment. I think it might have opened at 7 at various places last night when things went full time. Is that about right?
Weren't they watching the games? I was stunned, really, because Jacksonville's defense held New England in check, for almost the whole first half, for much of the second half. They only scored 24 points in the end. And Philadelphia's defense generated a touchdown, a turnover that led to another touchdown, and Philadelphia put a bunch of other touchdowns up on Minnesota, which is the best defense in the league. So I'm surprised the line is that high. I mean, 4.5, 5.5 doesn't make a huge difference on these things. But I was assuming the Patriots would have to be favorites in this. But when you, again, as I keep saying, when you look down the rosters, player for player, how many positions would you take the Patriots guy over the Eagles guy? And there aren't many, but the one, of course, that you would is at quarterback, and that's what makes the difference.
Mike, great stuff. Enjoy the next couple of weeks. Thanks a million. We'll talk to you again ahead of the final.
Let's hope Gronk is back from his concussion.
Totally.
My question is, when you ask him the kind of like questions to see if he's got a concussion, how can you tell it's any different from the normal Gronk?
Harsh but fair. Mike, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thank you. See ya.
Mike Carlson with us on the Monday morning here.
Yeah, the old concussion protocols in the NFL. I wonder, will there be a loophole in that to allow Rob Gronkowski to play? I saw great comments a few weeks ago that said if the NFL concussion people were around for the JFK situation, he would have been put back in the parade in Dallas. And I'm like, wow, that's dark, but also
too soon.
Well, yeah, I don't think it'll ever not be too soon, but it's kind of sums up the attitudes certainly on the ground over there towards the NFL concussion experts.
Yeah.
So Gronk's going to play the Super Bowl unless he picks up a different sort of injury.
He's totally going to play. And I think that might actually change their ability to attack the Eagles. That's the other that's what Jacksonville did without Gronkowski. But maybe that's the only way to deal with Gronkowski is to hit him high and hit him low. Like, that's what happens when you become one of the most dominant players in a league that seems to reward people for having those type of hits.